everybody, thank you very much. We are getting started a little late, so that is really my fault, so my apologies there. This is where we get to the fun part. And when I say fun part, of course, I'm being very sarcastic when I say this, because now is where we start to look at and say, okay, where do we stand as a district? And what do we look at in terms of financials? So we do have a PowerPoint here, which I will go over, but first what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass out a couple documents here. These are confidential documents, so please do not share these with people. These are working documents because our budget is not finalized, clearly. These are only drafts. So what I'm going to pass out first is, can you grab one for me so I have something I can say?
I thought you knew it by heart.
You would hope, but the first one that I'm passing around is just a summary of where we are in terms of the budget. The second document that is coming around, and I'll make sure Patty gets, is the detail of the summary. Okay? And this isn't where we're necessarily spending the bulk of our time. What we're going to look at today, you guys have this, look at it. This will give you ideas of things that we can look at in the future, of areas that we can save some money. These are the expenditures only. These are not the revenues. So what we're going to do today is we will go over this briefly. You've seen most of this already, everything but the staffing. So all the supplies, materials, you've already heard all of that. But now with the staffing added in, where does this bring us? And I want to go back to a comment that was made last time, and why I'm standing, I don't know, I just feel more comfortable standing. Don, you made the comment last time. And your comment was, with all these presentations that we actually had going on, and everyone going no more than 5%, if we were increasing, wouldn't that, by necessity, bring us to a point where we're going to be too high? And the answer, quite honestly, was yes. So you were right on. But each of the administrators, when building their budgets, we asked them to do a zero-based budget. And a zero-based budget is you build for what you need. So you start at the top of what you need. And I don't mean top in a bad way. You budget for everything in the ideal world. If you could have it, where would you be? And that's exactly what they did. That's what they were asked to do. And knowing full well that, of course, there's always potential if we are not at where we need to be, that there would be cuts that need to be made. And as almost every district can say for the past couple of years, there are very few districts that, on first glance, have not a deficit. Most districts are in a deficit situation, especially with what's been going on with the state over the past couple of years with the gap elimination adjustment. You take away millions of dollars, you're going to, by necessity, have a deficit that you have to work with. But you have to have a starting point for supplies, materials, and all that. And quite honestly, the bulk of what we're actually looking at are salaries. About 78% of budget is salaries, and most of that is contractually driven with, increases every year, step movements, stuff like that. So a lot of that is already predetermined for you, which makes your areas, once you have a deficit, a little tougher to just, get rid of supplies, materials, and add that be everything that you need. But as you'll see as we're going through this, our administrative team, I think, did a wonderful job of putting together a very thoughtful budget and then looking at potential reductions as well. So first of all, what I want to point out in the summary document, you're going to see our budget. If we had unlimited funds, of course we don't, we would be looking at $27,328,000. So on page 2, fairly near the bottom, under grand totals, on the 14-15 budget, you will see $27,328,808. Our budget this year was $25,724,26. So yes, there is a jump. That jump is about 6.5%, and you'll see that in the presentation. Now, that's our start, it's not our end, so I want to say that. The other thing to point out with this as well, if you take a look at the component percentage analysis, this is something that a lot of districts do look at. How much is being spent where? How much is being spent administratively? How much is spent in capital? And capital basically is, buildings, grounds, stuff like that, physical plant, that sort of thing. And then finally, program component. That's student programs. So that's teachers, the programs, everything along those lines. Yes?
Just for clarification, that administrative component, that means like clericals and things too, it's not just administrators, correct?
If they are not directly related to student services.
Right. I just don't want to make people
Yep.
think that that was just administrators.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
good point to bring up. What I want you to see is the distribution over the years. And particularly if you look at this year, if you look at the program component, our program component this year is 85.48%. If you look at every other year in comparison, we have more going into program this year directly student related than any other year. That was by design. These administrators have said, what can we do without to make sure students are getting as much as possible. So I think that is important for you to know that they did build a thoughtful budget when looking at this. It wasn't just what supplies and materials can we get for our offices. That is not where it went to. So I think that's important to know. The second document is really just a breakout. I'm not going to go over this today. Take that home, take a look at it. This is, as I said, our starting point of where everything is at. And as we look forward to say, where can we cut, what are some ideas there, this will help us. And again, just generating ideas. So what we're actually looking for and asking for, and what we will be asking for, are ideas. Not necessarily line by line and to go through it. That I don't think is necessarily the idea here, but if you're seeing, oh, you know, this reminds me maybe as an overall whole, maybe we can do something better. Have we thought of doing this? That's going to help guide us in terms of that. What I do want to do is really get down to the bulk of it. All of this comes down to what's in the presentation. What does this mean? Where are we at as a district? What is our shortfall for the year? What do we need to do to get to a balanced budget and put before the voters? Okay? So, 14-15, I can sit down now. 14-15 budget status and challenges. And again, every district will be facing...
Tom, can I ask a question before you go any further?
You can.
There's quite a few times it's non-certified salaries. Can you explain that a little bit with that? Because there's quite a few of them. I'm assuming for different areas.
Yes, so your certified staff are like your teachers, your administrators.
Okay.
Non-certified would be like CSEA.
Okay.
Okay. So it is broken up between those codes. Okay, so looking at this, appropriations, can everyone see this okay? Okay. As I said, in those documents, when you come right down to it, what is being proposed for the budget for next year is $27,328,000. Where does that compare to this year? Our budget this year, again, is $25,720,000. That is an increase year to year of $1.6 million.
You want them to have a copy?
Oh, yeah. We make copies for you guys. And we did try printing this in black and white, and unfortunately...
To save money.
Yeah, to save money, but when we did this, a lot of the text that you're seeing here is white, so white printing on white. It was all blank, so we thought you guys would actually want to see it, so our apologies for the color in advance. Okay? But please try and stay with me. I know everyone's going to want to go to the last page right away, but we'll get there, I promise. Okay, so as you take a look at this year-to-year difference of $1.6 million, and that is an increase of 6.25%. So that is an increase for salaries, for people moving up steps. That is an increase for contractual. That is a modest increase for healthcare. That is an increase for all supplies and materials. Okay? Revenues, because there are always two sides of a budget. There is the amount of money that you are looking to spend. There's the amount of money that you are looking to bring in. Okay, and all told on both sides, the spending and the revenue side, these are projections. When you're talking a $26 million budget, you may project something's going to come in, and it doesn't. It's a working budget. Every budget is every year. You are not going to spend every cent you thought you were going to. You are not going to realize every revenue you planned. So I just want to point that out as well. So for revenues this year, and I'm going to point this out to you when you take a look at the year-to-year difference. So if you look at revenues for next year, we are forecasting that we'll be at $25.226 million next year. This year, our revenues are $25,158. Now that is a difference of $67,000 for revenues of an increase. That is, if you take a look at the percentage increase from year to year on our revenues, that tells the story right there. Our revenues are not moving. And again, that's pretty much the case across the state. Your expenses always go up, you're not getting more money, your gap widens, what are you going to do? And that's why we're here. So if you look at less than 1% of revenues are going up. Expenses going up 6.25.
Because of people, yeah.
Expenses going up 6.25. Proposed. Revenues, which are pretty certain where we're going to be on that, 0.27%. Now, what I want to do is, if you all remember at the community forum, we talked about the tax levy increase. The tax levy increase is the amount taxpayers pay of our overall budget. So if your budget's $25.7 million, our taxpayers, the tax levy, are paying $13 million of that. We talked at that community forum that the levy would go up. We had said $232,000 at the community forum. And when I went online and actually put it all in, it was $231. So they shorted us by a few dollars from my calculations. But okay. So $231,490. So that's how much the tax levy, what the taxpayers can pay, is going up. $231. But our overall revenues are only, I'm going the wrong way. How about I go the right way? Are going up $67,000. So while taxpayers are paying more, we're getting less money. And why are we getting less money? Basically, because of the state. So even though the taxpayer share is going up, and this continues to be the case, the state keeps giving a little bit less.
A little bit?
Well, a lot less, but okay. And when I say they're giving less, this has nothing to do with the gap elimination adjustment. And I know we throw out a lot of terminology in education. We talked about the gap elimination adjustment. Again, to remind everyone what the gap elimination adjustment is the state saying, we're going to give you money for next year. Well, again, as I said last at the community forum, they're not giving us more money, they're just taking less money away. So they have planned to take about $1.25 million away from us next year in the state. What they said is, okay, we don't have to take the full 1.25 million from you, we're going to take about 1.125 from you. So we're still not getting that state aid, they're just taking less. Even with that give back, if that's what you want to call it, we're still getting less in state aid. So the less in state aid is, it's all driven by formulas. There's the foundation aid, there's building aid. We're getting less in those major categories there. And it's not even offset by how much they're giving back in the gap elimination adjustment. Yes?
I thought I read something and was in the State of the Union address that he was going to increase state aid to schools this year.
Our foundation aid is basically flat. Our building aid is going down because our projects, it's all based on the timing of your projects. So we're getting less aid.
Is this also having to do with some of the school buses that are running out on the 5-year payback period?
No, that's really nothing to do with the building aid project. So transportation aid does.
No, the overall decrease in the amount of state aid.
Correct. Transportation aid is a decrease as well. So yes.
Is decreasing because we didn't buy buses.
Yes, that is part of it as well, because it's all timing based on how many buses that you buy in any given year.
Because there's a 5-year reimbursement period that
Correct.
we use for the
That does
general
come into
fund
play. Yeah.
that we're not using because buses were not put up.
Correct, that all comes into play, so absolutely no doubt. So when you take a look at the major categories of foundation aid, building aid, transportation aid, I'm not trying to get so specific, but absolutely that comes into play. So
Okay.
when you look at that, those offsets are not made up by the increase or taking less from us in the gap elimination.
But I do think it's a matter of semantics, too.
Oh, it's semantics, all right.
So you say he's not giving us as much. He's saying, not Paul, but legislature saying, we're giving you back more.
Right.
But they're just not taking as much away from you.
That's right.
How do you know what they're giving you? I thought they don't make that decision until...
It's not finalized. And you're going to see in this proposal, the way that it actually works for state aid, the governor comes out first, which he already did in January. We wouldn't be able to make our budgets if they didn't come out with something. So the governor comes out first and says, here's what I would like to give schools. And then from there, then the legislature gets it, and they work on they work off of his and say, yes, we like this, no, we don't like this, we're going to increase this, we're going to decrease that. That part has not happened yet. I would expect that we are going to see more money, and we'll see in this presentation what my estimate is that we're going to get additionally from the state aid. I do think we'll get a little bit more. So,
When does that come?
That's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks.
So it is before you got to wrap up your final
Yes,
budget? for-
yes, it will. So, we hope, let's put it this way. We hope. It just depends on when they're done. We've adopted a budget on time for the past couple of years by April 1st. There's no guarantee they're going to adopt it on time. So if all works according to plan, then yes, we should know. But if they drag their feet, there's no guarantee we'll get it done. So we use our best guesstimate, and I'll kind of spoil the game a little bit. I estimate that we're going to get about another $100,000 in state aid. So, and that does come into my calculations, okay?
So even at the conference that I was at Albany over the weekend, it was interesting for me to hear the commissioner say that they're going to now be adjusting their budget year to year because they were surprised by what happened coming from the governor's proposals as well. So everybody kind of has to jump in after the fact, pretty late, actually, in trying to plan it. But that was an interesting comment to hear them make from SED.
Absolutely. And so now, as we go into the next slide and we start talking about looking at every year to year, and this is not, none of this is really talking about the shortfall yet. We'll talk about the shortfall later. But we're going to, we also need to every year to look at student needs and what they're going to need for program. We heard at the community forum that there are some areas that we really need to address. We know this. And just in keeping the budget the same, we know in some areas we need to add a little more. In some areas we need to reduce a little to make for this. It has nothing to do with the budget deficit. This is just every district every year does need to look and say, if you're remaining neutral, where do you need to add, where do you need to contract just to give students what they need. So the superintendent's going to talk next about staffing and looking at where that comes into play, even before we get into
So one of the first things that we should be looking at when we start to think about program is enrollment. And it's interesting because conversations that I've had, and just even recent conversations today with Mrs. Feasley, talks about this cycle that occurs in Eden, up and down over time. Our graduating class last year actually was a cohort of 156. Our current kindergarten class is 78. So we are on a down cycle. That doesn't mean it won't come back up at some point, but we're definitely on a down cycle. I mean, if you talk to Mrs. Feasley, who looks younger than her years here, she'd tell you that at one point there was a class of 180s here, right?
186,
186.
It was
And
very long ago.
not too long ago.
not too long
But when you're
ago.
looking at incoming class of 99 versus 186,
Yeah.
that's different.
Yeah. And that was based on building development. So
Solar development went in, yep.
yeah, when Weller Development went in, and that's not to say that Eden won't see those type of spikes again, so you have to keep that in mind as well. Yes.
Is there she said there was 186, I don't know when this was.
A couple years ago.
Was it 7 years ago?
About 2000.
That's not even that long.
It was the year I moved in. Yeah.
2007, graduating class of 2007.
How did our employee totals equal to then to now? Like, in other words, did we have the same proportion of whatever?
I'm going to give you a really short answer, which I don't have the history here, but my guess would be if the
I've got it
employee
right
total
here.
is the same, we've contracted staff, which we definitely had a contraction last year, and then we've had the offsetting, salary increases due to contracts and the healthcare increases. So between the two, it's lower?
The number of staff would be lower because,
Yes.
yeah.
Staff is lower. So the lower staff meets the higher contractual healthcare, and you get about the same. That makes sense.
The offset.
For the
We've
expense.
decreased staff, so we have less teacher expense, but we've also increased costs in salary because of contracts.
Sure.
Moving up steps, and also healthcare. So those two together get you about the same. And that's a really short
The numbers
answer.
equaled out then,
Yeah.
is what you're
But-
saying?
Well, that's what we attempt to do every year, is to try to create, to right size. Okay, based on enrollment, that's where you start, is with right-sizing program, right-sizing
You got to
staff.
remain about the same,
But
so.
how does the mandates, see, when I'm listening to everybody, is you got so many, they keep adding mandates on, but if your enrollment goes down, you can't get rid of that mandate, so can you get rid of that person that does whatever that
You have to
mandate
make tough
requires.
choices to meet the mandates. And I'm not saying this here, there are some districts that don't meet all their mandates, quite honestly, because they can't afford to. You know, and I'm not saying that here in any way, shape, or form, but it's a balancing act. You've got to pay more for those mandates. You have to look at your student numbers. You have to, I mean, you've got to weigh all that together. So if you have to do a mandate that costs, you may not be able to spend it elsewhere where you wanted to for students, in essence. So,
Has
yeah.
a school district ever gone broke?
There are
There are
school
some
districts that
going.
have, and by law, you cannot. Once you go in the red, you are pretty much, you can be taken over by the state if they so choose to do that. Now, it's a big undertaking for them to do that, but other districts have really faced very tough times. You probably heard of Niagara Wheatfield's financial woes over the past
Holland.
couple of years. They've had to have double-digit increases just to try and work themselves out of a multi-million-dollar hole that they were in. But you are not allowed legally to go in the red.
How would they do that if you have a tax cap?
Well, that's the whole point.
You have to, if they did, they had to basically go to the state and say, look, we are either going to go broke or you're going to work with us and allow us to do what we need to do, or you take us over. And the states gave Niagara Wheatfield the chance to dig themselves out. They're still not done. They're still not where they need to be. They still have a lot of tough times ahead of them. Their increase will not be anywhere, percentage increase anywhere close to what ours would be for the tax levy. I think they're talking about 4%, 5%, somewhere around there. And that's not even going above their levy, tax cap levy increase. So every district has a different amount they're able to increase tax levy. But they went through a very rough patch, which we don't ever want to go through, and we're preparing to make sure we don't go through that. So I make the tough choices now.
But I'm also going to say that it's different than it was a few years back. I mean, a few years back, things weren't as tight. You could have a few extra staff, and it wasn't as big of an impact because the state aid was there, because the money was there. But now with the tax levy limits and with the reduction in state aid, it's like losing some of your salary in your home, and you just have to shore it up a little bit more. And that's where you see, I think, the angst, because even as early as 2006, 2007, you didn't have to shore it up as much. And it has just gotten tighter and tighter along the way. And at the superintendent's conference that I was at in Albany over the weekend, it became very clear to me in all the conversations that, and I have stated this as a personal opinion, but it's the first time that I have heard it, this is a deliberate attempt, better than an attempt, by the state to have schools operate differently than they have been, to go regional, to close, to merge, to share services, to operate differently. And I would go so far as to say to you, out of the 648 districts in New York State, over the course of the next 6 years, which we're sure that this is what's going to be like for 6 years, that if 50% of the school districts survive out of this, that our legislature would be thrilled with that. Because while it may not be effective for us to share services as much to the state of New York when two school districts share services or capital projects or merge or consolidate, they don't have to pay as much into each of those separate districts.
I would also say I went to a presentation last Thursday night about the gap elimination adjustment. And they talked, and I really want to point this out at the next community forum, and I'm going to bring the presentation they actually gave. It was great to see. They talked about the gap elimination adjustment amount, and they talked about STAR. And what they've shown in both cases for the amount of money they're giving back for the gap elimination adjustment and how they've set up STAR, in both cases, that transfers money from here right to downstate. And the point was made very clearly is that with the continuation of the GEA, the gap elimination adjustment, and STAR keeping it the way it is, most districts would only have 1 or 2 years to be able to sustain themselves in tough times. So it really becomes a fight against the clock to see if you can outrun the gap elimination adjustment to, you know, hopefully when that's over, there aren't going to be all these districts standing.
And we're being told 5 more years. That was the news that came out this weekend.
What is it?
What's supposed to happen in 5 years?
Right, all of a sudden there won't be a gap?
The gap elimination adjustment is, again, the amount of money the state is saying we're taking away from districts in your state aid because we need to balance our budget.
Our state
It
budget,
started 6 years ago, and they said, this is only temporary.
3 years.
It's never temporary.
Right, and that temporary now is at year 6, and it is been told that the governor has no intent of stopping the gap elimination adjustment for at least another 5 to 6 years. So, which means we have to weather the storm. It may get smaller as time goes on, it will be there. So we have to deal with this. Again, our district alone saw $7 million.
7.7.
$7.7 million less in aid over the past 6 years. At the presentation, Niagara-Wheatville was talking, or not Niagara-Wheatville, Kentucky was talking about, we've had to, over those 6 years, and they mentioned what they did every year to reduce, and it was eliminate 35 positions, 23 positions, 32 positions. I mean, it was jaw-dropping to hear what some districts have had to do. Now, they're very reliant on state aid, but we, in comparison, haven't had it as bad. But we're being squeezed, no doubt about it, and we'll continue to be squeezed over years. So, had we had no elimination adjustment this year, we'd have no problem. But we do have it, and we have to deal with it. So.
We'd be in good shape. If you, just to segue for a minute, if you take a look at what Tom was talking about earlier in the summary sheet, at the bottom of the second page, where it talks about the different components, the capital component being that low,
Buildings, grounds, again.
building and grounds, is very telling in that districts and Eden have foregone taking care of repairs and building needs in order to give kids good instruction and good education. And I'm not saying that we want to change that course, but at some point, that repair will be an emergency, and that need will be bigger. And we see that right now with all the BOCES are in the same situation. Paul knows because he works at BOCES, where your building and grounds are just getting to the point where you have to fix them.
Dave came in and made today with another need that we now have.
You
so.
just can't wait anymore. But at what expense is what we say. What's going to give in this particular case? So I just wanted to point that out. On the slide that is up on the screen and the one that you have in front of you on these staffing adjustments, this basically is based on changing in enrollment, interest of students up at the upper levels, taking a look at what do we need to tweak year to year. And in this particular case, I think it's really important to look at the additions, because what we're hearing at the community forum is that our sixth graders aren't getting into the library, that by having a retirement in the library in the last year caused a part-time teacher to be working even more part-time in 2 school districts. So by adding a .30 full-time equivalent, or FTE, it is our way of saying that we're going to do our very best to get the librarian into the elementary school much more than this year. This doesn't make it full-time, again, in the elementary school. This is about 4 out of 5 days, but that's a whole lot better than what is happening right now. GLP is good with the amount of librarian time that it has, and the high school, junior, senior high school is all right as well. So this librarian addition is to basically state that we want our kids to have those skills from the library at the elementary school more. The .34 tech is basically 2 sections every day for 2 sections or 2 courses. We have approximately 50 students this year that did not get into a tech course that asked for it. In some cases, it is a graduation requirement in lieu of taking course or in lieu of taking art. We want our kids to be able to take the courses that they want to take, especially as a freshman. We are mandated to give technology at the 7th and 8th grade level, and to give 1 graduation requirement, either music, art, or technology, in grades 9 through 12. This .34 does not make a full program in tech for Eden schools, because again, 1 teacher is all 7 and 8. So what we have right now for the number of kids that we have in the high school is 1 full-time teacher for the high school, and for 7 and 8, basically required tech courses, another 1. Teaching, in some cases, classes that are too big for safety reasons, had to get rid of some of those kids. So this .34 proposed addition would basically be to not add program, but to allow kids to get into the program should they want to.
And I think to point out here that everyone should know is if that happens with the tech teacher, we will be able to bring students back from BOCES. But the way that BOCES works, we're not going to know the savings that we're going to see in BOCES immediately, because we have to adopt our budget by April with BOCES, And we have to go under the assumption, at least for the safety of the kids, to make sure they have an option for next year, that we have to give BOCES the number of kids that we're actually expecting. So we really won't see, in my opinion, the savings from BOCES to the following year.
And I would say that a .34 doesn't allow us to have such an intensive program that the students who are taking courses at BOCES could come back. It'll be a beginning, though, because you can't even have a beginning. You can't have a program until you have a beginning. So I would hope that if our state legislature figures this out, that we could see an increase in tech to get to even more of tech down the road so that kids could take it and we're not spending $8,400 a student every year to send them to BOCES. That would be my hope. The athletic director, which is a .03, is one section once a week. This is just an evening out because we have shared teachers along the way. This right now is one person as an athletic director, but for the most part it's just a matter of who also does teach. The qualifications to be a teacher on special assignment or a TOSA are such that if you are providing instructional support to other teachers, you can do that as a full-time TOSA. We have that. We have that with Kelly Morgan LaRosa right now, who is a full-time Director of Curriculum intern, full-time instructional support to teachers. Our athletic director is a TOSA, but does not provide instructional support. Most of what Marissa does is more management or administrative functions, scheduling, budgeting. The state does not allow that position, in that case, to be a 1.0 FTE. She can only be doing that .6, and so we still have her teaching, and this is just a way to allow her to be in the classroom and stay long enough for the bell to ring or the class to finish.
Now, the other thing that I would just mention in regards to TOSAs, or teacher on special assignment, not everybody here is very familiar with teacher on special assignment, but what that actually allows, it works well for, I think, all parties involved. It gives the teacher experience if they want to move into the administrative ranks to see if they like it, gain the experience to do it. And it also benefits the district because if you are paying a TOSA to do that job, generally speaking, you will be paying less than if you hired an outside administrator. You can't always do that, but it is an area here that for both those positions, if we had just a full-time administrator doing it, the salaries would be higher. There's no doubt about it. So just to give you a little background on that as well.
Physical education teacher, the .34, part of that is to adjust for an adaptive PE class because we have students whose IEPs state that they can't be in a class of 30 or can't be in some of the activities that a physical education class might be in. The other piece to that, though, is an evening out, again, as an elective PE because the class that's at GLP as an autism program is going into the elementary school. So if you bring a class up, you also have to add electives. So it could be library, could be computer, could be PE, could be art. The music teacher, which is a .07, is also that same thing. That is the elective area for music following along with the autism program going to the elementary school.
Is that supposed to be at the high school, the middle school, or?
No, it's going to be at the elementary school, so it's coming in from GLP into grade 3. Position proposed for reductions, a .4 FTE in the Gifted and Talented or REACH program. There are about 20 students who are serviced in this program. It is a pull-out program. Our intention is to be able to offer an enriched type of program in another way. German is a .17. We currently do not hold a 7th grade German class. We do hold an 8th grade German class. This year, the numbers for this current school year, the requested students that wanted to take German 7 were 8. So last spring, I pulled the 7th grade German, stating that we weren't going to start a 5-year sequence with 8 students. This proposed .17 FTE would be to not bring 7th grade back this current year. Yes, Don?
Do they have requirements on what languages you offer?
You just have to have a foreign language. You have to have 2 units before 9th grade, and then you can be out of it. But if in fact you're going after an advanced diploma, you must have 3 at the high school level.
But they don't tell you what languages they have to be?
No,
Okay.
you can do it at any time. You could be all Latin, could be all Spanish, could be all German, could be all French. We offer 3 right now. Family and Consumer Science, or more known as FACS, F-A-C-S, is a .51 or 3 section proposed reduction. This is also a 7th through 12th grade program. There is a requirement in 7th and 8th grade, and there is not a requirement in 9th through 12th. It is a pure elective at 9th through 12th. So that is a proposed reduction to program. Some of those classes are small, though, 7 kids, 8 kids, or 6.
Okay, so now you guys have heard about the appropriations, the spending, you've heard about the revenue side, you've heard about the student programming side. That brings us where are we at right now? Okay, appropriations or spending versus revenue. So given this, what we're seeing is for 14-15 appropriations, the budget is 27,328. The revenues are 25,226. When you look at revenue versus spending, there's a difference. One we obviously cannot sustain. It's $2.1 million. And Don, to answer your question from earlier, can you have a deficit? No, you cannot. So that 2.1 has to go away. And that's, again, what we're actually looking at is how do you whittle that down to basically zero? And our administrative team has been working very hard to see what can we actually do before we even go to the staffing side or the program side for students. Because the last thing that we want to do is impact student program. We don't want to touch that if we can. So that's first and foremost are our students. Second to that then is staffing and keeping that as consistent as possible. But our students obviously come first. But looking at that, our administrators said, okay, if we're not looking right now at the staff size for the program, what can we do that doesn't involve that? So the supplies, the materials, all of that. I think when you see the next slide, which the superintendent's going to talk about, I think you'll agree so far they've done a phenomenal job. Most districts I've heard already come out with their budget presentations there's a large deficit. When you see ours, it's large, but it's not a large deficit. And I think a lot of that is directly attributable to the administrative team. They have worked, they're
going to work
a little
against
browbeaten because we said, come on, give us more. We have to have more. And I think every administrator here could say, we've given till it hurts. And we're not done. We're meeting again tomorrow. So after we, even get some more ideas tonight as to possible areas we could look at, we're going back at it again tomorrow, and as a team, going to be looking to see where can we look at more outside of the staffing part of it. When we need to get there, we will, but we're trying to do everything we can to keep program intact. So now I will let the superintendent talk about what they've been able to come up with so far.
So even in addition to what we've been doing at our administrative meetings, we went all the way back into the fall where we started to ask for a laundry list because we want to look at what's good and also what we need to tweak. But even beyond that, at the community forum, when Jen spoke about the district that she works in for the percentage that and the deficit that you have, it just put shivers through my mind because that's a lot. And I would agree with Tom in that we're not that high because we have, as a group, really tried to think out of the box. An email that I sent out district-wide today also is saying, help us find this. You might have better ideas or more ideas than we have. We will take any ideas that we can. Some we can use, some we can't. I know that the audience can't see this, but the BAT has a sheet on this one. So let me just go through because some of it is in our own nomenclature, which could be confusing to you. This 10% reduction across the board in supplies, materials, or contractual conferences, for the most part, would be driven by building administrators being able to decide within their own budgets what that looks like. The pool speakers.
Well, and can I even just touch
Absolutely,
on that for a
yeah.
second? And again, I think this goes right back to, Don, your comment last week, and I know there's more of the BAT members here, but you made the comment again, because I feel like I've just been calling on you all night.
You have.
But, again, with the 5% increase and looking at what, and we know that we can't sustain that. So again, we've got our wish list as to what we really need to run the classrooms and everything, and the teachers put in their budgets. We know we need to go back and say, as part of shoring this up, let's see what we can do with less with supplies and materials, and that's the resulting 10%. It's going to make it tough in the classrooms. There's no doubt about it. I think you can fully probably agree on that, saying, looking at that,
what do you give up?
It's going to be hard to cut our budgets by 10%. Each building will do it a little differently in how they come up with it.
That's right.
But so we did take that into account.
The pool speakers, again, we've had much conversation about where we need to get the funds for that, and we know that it's an emergency piece, though, but we do feel that there are other means and able to do that. The curriculum materials and conferences, again, this is coming directly from our administrators and from Kelly as to what can we do less but more with. And that might be the textbooks, it might be looking at something where it's a class set instead of kids taking it home. The BOCES COSER for certification is something that we utilize with all of our teachers who are coming in new to help us make sure that our teachers have all the certifications that we need. For the most part, Mrs. Tomasulo is in charge of all of that. And we have accounted for one question at $450, Mrs. Tomasulo.
No more.
That's all you
That's all
get
I
is
get.
one question if this goes through. The PPS BOCES budget, this is basically taking a look at our student needs. So PPS, again, is our pupil support. Taking a look at our student needs and where we might not need that because they are either aging out or graduated or have transferred out of our district.
Or we're bringing back.
Or
whichever
we're bringing them back from an out-of-school placement, which is also part of the next one. There are no students that are scheduled for Summit or CPC for next year. Also, the PTA-funded field trips, if I could reword that for you, it would be that they would only be PTA-funded field trips. Right now, PTA funds our field trips for K-6 and 7-12, the district pays for them. So what we are stating is that it would become, with PTA wanting to do that, a K-12 funded field trips or fundraising. One bus run preschool learning center, again, this is based on student need and it is considered not needed for next year. Route 7 was cut down this year to 2 hours, so that actually is a big help for us. It's just basically Rose Hackathorn looking at the routes and saying we can try to shore this up a little bit by our buses being out there already, these runs taking over some of it and creating less of a run on Route 7. The next one, a midday run for Regents exams. What we do right now in January and June is we pick up kids in the morning, and then we take them home at 11 o'clock when they're done with the Regents exam. We pick up the afternoon Regents exam kids, and then we drop them off at the end of the day. I am used to, in other districts, and I believe that it wouldn't be much different here, is they come in the morning, and we will give them a place to sit until the 3 o'clock bus if they don't have an exam in the afternoon. Many of them will find their own way. But that is also a $3,000 savings. Saving in sub-cost due to no outside conferences other than BOCES. BOCES right now reimburses us a particular percentage. What is it?
Well, for BOCES services, that's
Yeah.
aidable about 56%.
So BOCES will aid us about 56% on sub-costs if in fact we are using BOCES services for the day. If in fact we're sending a teacher out to a conference that is not supplied by BOCES, BOCES will not aid us on that. So we're stating only BOCES conferences. Internal auditors, this may be, we're not really sure yet, but may be the first year that we're not required to have internal auditors on our staff.
Can I touch on that?
Please, this is your baby.
Internal auditors, we have a couple different layers of auditors here in the district. The first is our claims auditor. They look at every payment that goes out of this district, make sure we're not paying sales tax, making sure we don't pay for drinks. If someone goes out, they look at everything to make sure everything's kosher in the way it's supposed to be. That's claims auditor. Next, the state put into legislation, I can't even tell you how many years ago, that districts were required to have an internal auditor. The internal auditor would monitor different areas every year, just check to see if you have any weaknesses. They work directly for you. We work with them frequently. So when, we were looking at a possible retirement incentive, I was on the phone with our internal auditors frequently. Because there are some questions, quite honestly, I would rather ask the internal auditor than the external auditor. The external auditors report to the Office of the State Controller. And so...
They're not ours.
They're not ours.
That's right.
I mean, we hire them, but they're basically, what they're coming up with is going to OSC. And so there may be some things I may not run by them that I would run by our internal auditors just to make sure we're doing everything we need to. So by the time the external auditors get here, we're where we need to be. Now, the legislation with the internal auditor said that if your student numbers, if you're less than 1,500, you aren't required to have an internal auditor. Now, I don't know at this point if that means that next year we're expected to dip just below 1,500. And what you'll see there, it says 1,472 kids who are in district, and there are about 9 who are our kids out of district. So that puts us below 1,500. I still need to find out if you can do that in your first year, or if you have to wait till you're done with your first full year of being below 1,500. I don't know that answer yet.
Good. The .34 tech position just simply wouldn't be added. So you saw on the other slide that it was a proposed addition. If in fact it is included on these as a reduction, it just simply would not happen. The physical therapist was double budgeted from last year. Basically, we contract out for some of our related services, and then we have our own staff for others. This was an area that was double budgeted. We have contractually 189 staff days. That includes faculty that are salary, but it also includes CSEA, which are mostly hourly. The proposal would be for a 188 teacher day. The teachers still, because their salary would make the same amount, but it would be the loss of a day with students, in which case the buses wouldn't run, the kitchen wouldn't be here, the monitors wouldn't work, the teacher aides wouldn't work, and that would be about an $8,500 savings. I would say to you that if we have a winter like we did this year, though, that it's not going to happen, because you might need the day. Summer hours being closed on Fridays. This is basically a capital a reduction. We're stating that if in fact the buildings on the campus were closed on Fridays, it would be worth about $3,000 in utilities that we could save.
And I would say, again, that sounds like it's out of the box thinking. The administrator
Absolutely.
thought of everything we could possibly look at.
Yeah.
So.
And for
this
the
is
most
out
part,
of the box.
the people who work here would either work from a different station in another building, or if in fact they're salaried, do something different. Principal equipment lines.
What about if you close that day, what about the work that has to be done for the 5
They could
days?
work from a different station. So if GLP or somebody is closed, they might be able to work either from, if it's per building or if it's per district. We would have to work with the unions to see how it is that we could make up for the work that needed to be done on different days.
The work would still get done. It's not that the work.
You have to have it done. You can't start school without
But
it.
it would be Fridays, everybody would take off.
Might be a Monday.
I mean, so it'd be one day a week, everybody would take off.
Or it could be the coveted Wednesdays. But yeah,
Well, I really question that, just because
it's. and I-
everybody's so busy already, and to take a day away,
They're not reducing their workload. Their work hours would remain the same. It would just be spread out differently.
And it may not be that it's every building the same day. I mean, you could close GLP on one day and close the elementary school on another day, and the junior, senior high school on another day, and still equate to a full day. So it could happen.
so the staff is still going to be here 5 days.
I don't know. It's a proposal to give some thought to it.
But they would be working longer.
The hours would be the same.
Yeah.
Their hours
Well,
don't.
the weekly hours would be the same. So as an example, and I'm not saying this is the way it would
10
be
hours.
structured, this is something that would need to be negotiated. So instead of working 7.5 hours for 5 days, you'd work 9.5 hours for 4 days. So you're still making up the exact same time, you're just working longer. I'm not saying that is how it would look, just an idea. So they'd still be working in their same number of hours.
And I think it's really important to state that when we try to think out of the box, we don't think about the details. We just start throwing and brainstorming ideas, because your brain really can't do both at the same time.
Right.
You can either come up with an idea, or it can come up with a problem and a
I
solution.
can see where I'm
Yeah.
coming from, is I just remember Mr. Schaefer just pulling his hair out all summer long. He could never figure out that schedule,
Wow.
and he was there for 5 days.
Oh, trust me, our summers are so short that,
So to take a whole day off, but I.
oh, we get it.
But your hours wouldn't be. The reason why this was looked at is the cost to operate a building for the air conditioning, the electricity. That's the reason why.
We could turn the air conditioning off.
Okay, all right.
That's, write it
Wait a
down.
minute.
Write it down.
Who was complaining it was cold in here when we got in here?
Cold is different heat, it's different than.
I really-
And as people start taking more clothes off because they're very warm, that brings a whole other problem we don't necessarily need.
I think there's a lot of details
Yeah.
in that plan that need to be looked
Yeah,
at before.
no,
we-
absolutely.
But, you know, I'm really glad that there's conversation around it, because sometimes one idea like that will spawn other ideas, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Give us ideas. Let's think about this. Yes.
I don't know if I'm going to have this right. But last year, I remember they were talking about a different type of health insurance would have saved I don't even know what happened with it, okay? But I remember it was a substantial savings, and I don't even know, it could have been crap health insurance. I don't know enough about it. But was that ever looked into further, or?
Let me take this one, okay?
Go ahead.
What I would say to you is that our contracts all have in them enough specificity that we can't just change the health insurance.
Sure.
And so we are working with our units to see who is willing to go and who is not. Some of our units are, and some would like to negotiate it.
And Don, also just to touch on that, healthcare has been a great source of profit around here, because it's always one of your largest increases. Again, almost like a mandated thing that you can't really predict where they're going to go with the increases. They give you the increase, and that's the increase you get. So looking at that, we've been averaging anywhere from about 10 to 12% a year. And we've really worked very hard with Blue Cross Blue Shield to say, this really is a problem. We are looking at other plans. NY44 is what you're referring to, that was looked at.
I don't remember what it was.
That's what it
it's
was.
called. We're still looking at that this year. We've had presentations from NY44, Univera, Independent Health, Blue Cross Blue Shield. During all those meetings, whether it be a result of the meetings or whatever, Blue Cross has come back and said, they stated publicly, we're not going to increase your rates at all next year.
It's not a guarantee.
I then pressed them and said, okay, you're saying you're not going to increase any next year. Will you put that in writing? No. So, that being the case, knowing even if they said 0 and they won't put it in writing, I budgeted a 3% increase, because it shouldn't be that great of a fluctuation. But a 3% increase is far better than 10 or 12. So, before we get to that point of negotiating with each unit to possibly change, this is something in the immediate that we can act, that's helping us for this year.
And they won't, and the current health insurance that we work with can't give us the rates until the second week in May, which is too late for us on a budget. Now, even if some groups are willing to move and some groups really want to negotiate it, we run the risk of the current health insurance company stating to us, well, unless you have everybody, we're not going to give you this rate. So we have to really be cautious.
Yeah.
And I've pretty much slowed down some of the units that are willing to go, even as much as 8 or 9 months ago, because we don't know what effect that would have on the remaining, on the school district for the remaining group, or for us. I'll move on. The principal equipment lines, basically, this is not really, I don't think the principal means it's the principals, but
No.
it's the equipment that the
building.
districts need or use. And equipment is anything that costs over $500. Otherwise, it's a material and a supply. So if it costs more than $500, it goes onto an equipment line. And the equipment line is really an interesting one because it doesn't have as flexibility as all the other ones do. So you have to be really, really careful on the equipment line as to what you budget in, because you can't necessarily take it back out. Yes? You can put as much in there as you want, but it's not coming back out.
Can you explain a couple of the things, Sandy?
That for equipment? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, here's an example. The science department, or not science, the technology department this year got a new, what's the piece of equipment called?
It's a
Kind of a cutter.
It's a
A
plasma.
plasma cutter.
And that plasma cutter was unfortunately a large purchase item, but it allows the students to be able to, and somebody help me out in actually what the students are able to do.
I don't know, but
Cuts metal?
Precision cutting.
Precision cutting for
my
metal.
husband wants one, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
well.
So in the
he's
chopper
gonna
program,
spend a
it's,
lot.
that's
We all
right.
want one.
We don't have.
It's nice. It could be a piece of equipment that's in building and grounds, too. It could be something that Davis needs. It could be something with the lawn.
Cogen plant.
The cogen plant, if it's
Cogen,
over
yeah,
500,
We are
yeah.
responsible for routine maintenance
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
It could be if, like, and I'll use technology even though they have their own budget, but if a smart board were to fail and we had to come up with them, we had it budgeted separate from that. It could be a bookcase, any larger equipment item.
You okay with that, Barb?
Yeah, thank you.
Closing a building on the weekends. We currently do not charge anybody, any outside group or inside group, for utilizing our facilities during the weekdays or the weekends. And so a proposal on the table is to close the building on 1 or 2 days on the weekends. And again, saving utility costs, not having to have staff on hand to clean or to be here when they are in the building as well.
What?
It seems like that's a low number. That's all it would say.
Well, it's
Pretty much utilities.
When you say
Utilities?
yeah.
closing a building on the weekends, that's one building
No, the
per
buildings.
weekend?
No, the buildings.
So this is all of them?
3 buildings.
Yeah, it's really a combination between that and the summer hours. If you're looking at 1 day a week on the weekends, it's really the combination of the 3 and 1208. So those two really kind of go together. So 4208 is really kind of what you're looking at for both.
And the closing the building on weekends, is that for a whole year?
No,
Is it just for the summer or?
summer.
Just for
That's
summer?
what you quoted right there, summer only.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Closing a building on.
It's all the buildings
All
on the
buildings
weekends
on
in the
weekends for
summer.
So wouldn't that actually kind of be a loss for us? Because we are now looking at charging.
So let me back up it for a moment, because what Mike Burns is basically stating is that the Board of Education is looking at a change in its building use policy so that it would be tiered, but could charge for the use of its facilities to groups. So if in fact there were adults that are not from Eden, there would be rates that they would be charged for the use of the buildings. If it
What if they
or
are
a
from
company,
Eden?
then there are 4 tiers to that. If they are children and it is from Eden, then it could be no cost.
As
So-
you, the board, remember at about 2 or 3 meetings ago, you guys did approve the building usage policy of charging and then tasked a committee to come up with the pricing structure for that. I think now what we're looking at is, at least the first 2 groups I know definitively, I think the first 3 groups. The first group being student groups, no additional charge. The only thing, and what I mean is-
Student groups from Eden.
from Eden. So all they would potentially look at is that there's additional hours for, custodial or whatever, but there's not going to be a room use fee. Second group are
Not-for-profits.
not-for-profits that primarily serve children. They have to serve at least 60% of the children from Eden. So
Like a
that'd be
Boys and
Eden
Girls
Kindergarten.
Club.
And there's no charge there either. The third group is, I believe it is a 50% charge, what we're looking at, is for adult groups, and with 60% of the adults from Eden. And then the final group is everyone else. So no matter who you're serving, if you're for-profit, you could be not-for-profit serving most of your adults or kids from outside of the area.
It could be a dance group from Western New York who wants our auditorium.
So you guys have 4 tiers there.
So in that regard, yes, it could hurt. Okay.
And the other side of that is, now that we have a number, we know what it costs per day, regardless of what we are generating in revenue.
That's only over the summer
I
though.
thought this number was all summer long.
Yeah, we multiply by the number of days.
Oh, okay.
But we did break, we started with the daily rate.
And this is only on the weekend, $1,208
Yeah.
for a weekend. So it's really only 8 weeks or 8 days.
Because for the most part, our buildings are open in the, at least this building too, during the week in the evenings. So I mean, you can walk in and out of here just about any time up until 11:30 and there's somebody utilizing the building.
And Saturdays are normally open anyway, so that 1208 was just the Sundays.
Mostly Sundays.
Sundays only. We didn't pick our Saturday and Sunday, it was
So
just
it's only one day.
Sundays.
It's not the whole
One.
weekend.
Correct. It's only based on Sunday.
Well, that makes a big difference.
Did you say that there would be a charge for custodial
Yes.
hours?
Should be.
Okay.
Yep.
The $5,000 for the elementary parquet floor refinishing was something that Dave talked about in his last presentation, so that would go on hold. Tuition to other districts for some of our students who are special ed, knowing that they don't need to go to those districts for next year, or they're being pulled back and it's okay for their program, is a $20,000.
Sandy, can you touch on that a little bit, the special education tuition? Why were we sending them if we didn't?
Because we don't offer an appropriate program here for
So
those students' needs.
We plan on increasing the programs here for them? or-
That's what our autism room is. And so you saw that happen. Sean Johnson, 3 years ago, proposed that to the current superintendent at the time and started the autism program at JLP. That's exactly right. Otherwise, those students would have been sent out to other autism programs, sometimes as high as $40,000 to $60,000 plus transportation in some cases. So yes, we do that. But every time you run your own business and every time you try to bring in programs like that, you have to add staff. So you really have to know your numbers to understand, is it worth adding that staff for one student? How many students do you need? What are the related services? Do you need a nurse? Do you need speech? Do you need physical therapy? So it really is very complicated. That's why she's so calm all the time. Right, Sean? Right.
Calmest person I know.
But that could be a source of revenue, too. if
Well, it
we
has
bring
been.
in
It has
other
been.
Kids from other districts.
The autism
so-
room has been a source of revenue for the districts, but all students age up. And so the situation that we have right now is students aging up to the elementary school, but still needing some program at GLP. So we run the risk of, again, we're at that in-between stage of trying to run a program that is K-3 now, not K-2. And you can't keep kids together that are too old for each other. There's a variance, but it's still not that good to do that to kids. That gives a subtotal. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, of 864, and we have just below there's no dollar associated with this. The administrators are holding off, depending on where we actually get with the budget, needed programs that they were looking for through BOCES for next year. Centricity is a special ed program, Q Center, and don't worry necessarily about the terminology, but the Q Center it's a work order system district-wide. We do have one right now. It doesn't do everything we needed to do. So the one we have now is 600. The Q Center service, which is more robust, would be 2,000. Turnitin and Pebbles Go, those are curriculum programs, which would be 37, 38 apiece. Now, if we do our job, we get where we might be able to consider those. It just, right now, they're just on hold because we can't do what we wanted to do. If that makes sense. And finally, I'm sure nobody peeked ahead to the very end to see where we ended.
Don was.
I just turned the page.
How did I know it was going to be you, Jeff? Really?
Is that why she's sitting next to you?
I knew.
Yeah?
Okay, so what does this mean for us as a whole?
Sit next to you next time.
Okay, this bottom line is, where are we at right now? This number will change with every meeting we have. Hopefully it'll go down and down until we get to zero. Well, it will get to zero. We started with the difference between our revenues and our expenses of $2.1 million. Even though our spending was only going up 1.7, we didn't have enough revenues, so it's $2.1 million difference where we started. We are looking at using our reserves for next year. We build reserves to use them, and it's good and bad. And this district had this conversation last year about use of reserves. There was a plan in place to use the reserves up over a 5-year period. The
Starting
good news,
when?
2 years, I think we're 2 years, would be 2 years.
This would be
into
year
it or something
3?
like this. Year 3?
Next year, going into year
Next
3.
year.
Okay.
But the problem with doing that is if you use up all your reserves and use it over a 5-year period, in 5 years, your reserves are gone. And again, let me go back and state, reserves are like a savings account. It's the best way I can say it for your home, so having a savings account. You want to build up a savings account, so if you get laid off, you have something to fall back on. Now, you don't want to have it be so large that, you know what, hey, I don't ever have to work again, if any of us could ever get to that point. So we realize in school districts, we'll never have reserves that are so large that we don't ever have to worry. Our reserves are healthy right now, but if state aid were cut off, our reserves could be gone in a year. And that's part of what they were talking about with the gap elimination. So we have built up our reserves to the point of saying, we know we do need to use them. If we use them all up in a 5-year period, in year 5, when we still have the gap elimination to worry about, we want to have savings.
That's
And
the districts that are in trouble.
That's what we're talking
Okay.
about, of going in the red.
Because they
What do we
use
do?
their
What is-
reserves.
What is healthy?
How much do we have in our
Yeah.
reserve?
5, 6 years.
Like, for instance, we have several different reserves, and we've had presentations on the reserves already at a couple of the board meetings, but in our employment retirement system reserve, and you'll see the use of the reserves.
That's
We
your
have-
ERS.
We have just under $3 million in that reserve.
Sounds like a lot of money.
It does sound like a lot of money, but when you consider
Not the way it's going out.
not the way it's going now, and here's why. Our employee retirement system bill that we're paying this year is about $660,000. Am I right on the bill amount?
So it's 5 years.
So $660,000. 5 years is over $3 million if you add that up. Now, hopefully it'll go down over time. I mean, there's a couple things at play there. But in 5 years, that reserve would be gone if we use it every year to pay for the ERS bill that comes in. So you don't want to pay the entire thing. So you want to manage it, just like you would your savings account. You're not just going to tap out your savings account in 1 year. You're gonna strategically use it. If you have money left over at the end of the year, if you can put some back in and keep it at a level where you're gonna have more than a 5-year span. So you are always gonna hear me say that to be conservative with the reserve.
5 years is healthy to us. Now, in all due respect, when this started in 2009, districts and school boards were told to, basically, that this type of restrictive funding coming in would be gone in 3 years. So trying to create a plan of usage like Eden did over the course of 3 years was not unusual, and it was smart. But it was last year, it was right before Tom and I came in, and we had an interim director of finance, which was Lorraine Ingrassi, who said, you can't continue on this path. Because if you continue on this path, knowing what we know now, is that the legislature has changed course. They're not stopping after next year. You have to reverse it. And that's when Eden's Board of Education reversed the use of reserves last year, or we would have been in a much different situation.
When the state doles out their state aid, and you might not even know this, do they look at, oh, Eden's got $3 million?
I don't believe that, it's all based on a formula. So whatever your reserves are, it's like, I don't know,
But he did a few
10
years
pages worth
ago.
of formula. No, it's just based on a formula. So they don't look at your reserves as part of that. It's formula driven. And again, if you're able to keep some reserves, you're never going to get all the state aid you want. Basically, let's put it that way. So they're hoping by having less aid, they're forcing districts to use up all their reserves. And by forcing you to use all your savings, by forcing you to get less state aid, by forcing you to have a tax cap levy, they're going to force you into consolidation or mass layoffs or mass corrections to achieve what they want to do.
But I am going to go back, because I think what you may be referring to is a number of years ago when the comptroller, the governor said, all these school districts have all this money in reserves. They're just hanging on to it, and they need to use it. That was the beginning.
And that is true. That has actually been said. But again,
How long ago did they say that?
09.
09?
Oh,
yeah,
0809.
but I'll guarantee you right now, districts are using up their reserves and fund balance and everything they have right now.
I don't know, what is the goal then? If they, okay, they want to merge the school. Yeah,
Consolidate.
they want us to consolidate and move together, but.
It's
what
not
you're
just
saying
about
is still
consolidation and merging together. It's about public education looking different.
Looking different.
Looking different than it has, absolutely. Public education is a very expensive venture, and there are politicians who believe that education should look different, whether you're talking vouchers, whether you're talking privatizing, whatever it could be, magnet schools, charter schools, whatever those are. And Kevin Gaughan has been out there since the early 80s talking about regionalism. They want it to look different. Absolutely.
And I would also, just to add it also in reserves, obviously reserves are critical in terms of shoring up when we do have differences. But if you have no reserves, the interest rate you're paying on loans is higher. I mean, a lot, it's like your credit worthiness. It all comes into play. So I already know, I'll guarantee you, it will be a call to increase our use of reserves more. We are going to have to increase some. I would caution this board at looking at how much we use, because
I think there's a limit. We're only allowed to use so much, aren't we?
well, there are limits to how much can be taken out of reserves. It depends on the type of reserve and everything, and it depends on
We
each
ran into
reserve.
that last year. We could only take
Yeah,
so
but
much.
what's the one, the ER?
The ERS that we're
Yeah,
talking?
we could take the whole thing out.
Well, you can't more than what your bill is. If our bill is $600,000, you can't take out $1 million from ERS, because you could never tell the auditor, you could not
No,
justify using
No,
it.
I'm saying for this budget, we could,
You could.
Yeah.
You could go to 600,000. My personal advice, and you and I have had this conversation, my personal advice is I wouldn't necessarily go the full 6 just because of that reason. You're forcing yourself, when you use a reserve, here's the other thing that comes into play. When you use a reserve, you've now increased your spending by paying for it by using your savings. So next year, just to maintain that same level, you're saying we're going to use that same level of savings again, just to stay at the same spot. So once you go, let's say to 600, and again, we've had this conversation. Once you go to 600, you're saying, and now we're going to either continue using that 600 every year, or we're going to have reductions to make up for that 600 we're not going to use now.
So let me play it from the other side. Should the board decide that it wants to use more than 200,000 in reserves, because it doesn't want to cut program, it doesn't want to do what we're hearing some other districts are doing, which is cutting all music, cutting all art, cutting all sports, whatever that is, and chooses to use 400,000, 600,000, whatever it might be in reserves. Next year, we have two options. We either find that same amount of money so that we're neutral again, or we cut next year. It's, again, that much money, because otherwise you're not starting out at a level playing field. And that's the concern.
And that same assumption is that your expenses are not going to go up.
That's
next
if your
year.
expenses just remain the same.
That's
That's
right.
correct.
And they will go up.
And they will
Because
go
everything
up.
goes up.
And state aid isn't going to come in any faster.
That's absolutely correct. Your expenses are going to go up, which is naturally going to give you a deficit to begin with, even if you didn't.
So even at this number, which is conservative, which is the 200,000, we already know that we either have to use 200,000 again out of ESR, out of that reserve next year, or we have to cut $200,000 worth of some expenditure just to be budget even.
Before we even look at increases in expenses.
That's right.
Now,
Tom,
yeah.
do you know last year, when, after the legislature came back with how much money we're gonna get in state aid, how much more did we get?
I don't have last year. Mary, you may know, but it's probably in the $100,000 range.
So
Somewhere in the $150,000 range.
So that's why we're using it as an estimate this year, 100. I would rather estimate a little low and have it come in a little higher than vice versa.
That's why I hired you.
I will tell you, I am very conservative.
He underestimates his revenues.
And overestimate
Estimates his
expenses a little,
expenditures,
because
that's
if you
right.
don't, you're going to be in a bad spot. Reserves, again, I'm not saying don't use them. I'm saying let's use them cautiously so we can use them for the next 10 or 15 years to get us through, not 5 and be done. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The money from this year's budget that is left over, so
Yeah,
to speak,
will
when we
go in
come in
there.
under budget, where does that go?
It will go in here. It will either help us use less reserves or have less of reduction. So yes,
buy
it will
school
go in
bus.
there. What was that?
School buses.
Or, again, we have on the docket, again, one of the proposals that was out there, as we know, I'm putting out proposition in for buses. If you have leftover from this year, instead of putting it up for a bond, you could buy up your leftover money this year, start generating your aid next year. If you put it up for a bond, and depending on the timing of it, you might purchase them next year and start the aid the year after. So the sooner you're able to buy it, the better. So if we have leftover this year, that probably would be number one you'd want to do, get that expense out and get that aid flowing in as quickly as possible. If there's leftover after that, yes, it will go in towards reducing the deficit.
And I don't suppose you have a ballpark on where
No.
we're coming in under budget?
Yeah, not yet.
Next year, when you ask him at this time, I think he will, because he would have created the budget, and he would have gone through a whole cycle of the budget, but you didn't create this budget.
The one we're in now?
No, and bills come in every day that we don't know about. I just got one in today for $13,000 that, I don't know if that was written down anywhere.
Correct. And for me to give you a number now without
Mm-hmm.
having gone through the full to see when the bills come in and where, I would be doing a disservice to say where we're going to end.
So I usually walk those over and say, did you know this was coming in this week? It was
Some
kind
are unknown bills. We're like, okay, that's, when we get a bill from Orchard Park for a student we didn't expect.
This was Hamburg.
Unknown bill, here you go. So,
But next year, we will know more.
but if we do have leftover, yes, it will go down to either lower the deficit or bring back whatever I tried to do this year and didn't think we'd be able to do, one of those two. So it will come into play. It's a good question.
So you really don't know that then till June 30th?
So probably until after the budget's done. If I get lucky and I get a clear picture before we adopt, I might be able to come up with a number to say, okay, we can do this.
And you'll be a
It
little
just depends on
closer.
the time.
You'll be a
Yeah,
little closer.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. But looking elsewhere, what we're looking at, so use of reserves, which I think we had beat that conversation to death.
Yeah.
Additional state aid, I think that, the estimate of 100 is pretty accurate. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more.
A lot more.
We'll keep the fingers crossed on that. And then the proposed reductions that we're looking at now, if we adopted all of them. Probably won't adopt all of them, but again, this is just the first glance of what we're actually seeing from this. So this will change definitely as time goes by. So what we're looking at right now is a difference of 938. That is our starting point that we're looking at that we still need to shore up to get us to zero, okay? That will definitely, as I said, it will change as every draft comes out. This is what we call our draft 3. The first draft were all the presentations by the first set of administrators. The second draft was all the presentations by the second set of administrators. This is draft 3, which is the full budget together. Draft 4 will now be what we are going to do at this point is we're going to turn it over to you guys. But before I do that, I just want to say, and I actually typed this out. I normally don't read. I kind of speak from the heart, but I didn't want to forget any of this. So if it sounds for Hearst, it's because it is for Hearst, so my apologies for that. Let me just start by saying that the figure you're seeing here, this 938, is a result of hard work by everyone involved. Your comments have been heard, both at each of the BAF meetings and also from the residents at the community forum. We listen to everything that's been said, and we try to take it all into account. There's no doubt that with the consistent state funding shortages and shifting money from western and upstate New York to downstate, our district and most around us are going to be seeing deficits for years to come. Those districts who are prepared to weather the storm for at least, my estimates, at least another 6 years. If they're talking the gap elimination will go for at least another 5 now. Well, they say that now, they'll change their minds and it'll keep going up. But for at least 6 more years, we'll be the ones to survive. And others will fall victim to possible consolidation. In order for us to survive and do the best we can for students, we'll need to make some tough choices this year and for several more years to come. It's not going to be, we're just going to be showered with money. We're not going to know what to do with it, unfortunately. It may be easy to pit one department against another department as we start talking about that as meetings go on, or one program against another. The truth is, honestly, we're all in this together. So rather than going and pitting one against another, it's how do we all get through this together? I think that's how we need to look at this. It's going to be tough moving forward, not to associate people with programs. We just said that now. If you start thinking of the people that go along with it, it makes it virtually impossible not to bring emotion into the financial decisions you actually need to do. I'm a numbers person, there's no doubt about it. I look at the bottom line numbers. I realize when we look at reductions, it affects people, it affects program. I'm not immune to that, but we still need to get to zero. So you're going to hear me talk about the dollar side of it. It does not mean I don't care with anyone involved, and I don't want anyone to think that. As I said, we must, in order to do, we got to do this to do what's right for the students. I hate the thought of anyone being affected, as I just said. But this is something no one here, I think anyone at this table, wants to think of affecting students or program or staff. No one here does. But that's why we're all here, to start looking at it. It's the board's mission to adopt a fiscally responsible budget. It's the BAT members to offer ideas and suggestions, but ultimately it's the board's fiscal responsibility. But if we don't do it this year, we're eventually going to have to make much tougher choices in future years, and the cuts will be deeper. So if we work at it every year, it will be consistently tough, no doubt about it, but it's better to be consistently tough than to have a huge cliff. So again, that's my conservative side talking. We'll do everything we can to avoid that cliff for you guys. As our guide, first and foremost, we will look to preserve program for students. Second, we look to preserve staffing. Students come first, always. Now what we want to do is we want to hear from you guys. Longer than we expected, but it's very important. We want to hear from you guys. We're going to take your suggestions as to areas we can look at. We're going to bring it to our administrative meeting tomorrow, look at more cuts. So when we come back for either the board meeting or next community forum meeting, we're lower than that 938, and we'll consistently keep working at it. So that being said, I want to turn over to the superintendent.
I just can't see it from here. So I mentioned this earlier. Whenever we start to think about brainstorming or try to think out of the box and be creative, it's really important to know that your brain really cannot do two things at one time. It can either create ideas or it can generate concerns, but it cannot do both. And so we're not asking for you to do all of that right now while we're sitting here, but I do want to share what is up on the screen. We will record all ideas, and all ideas sometimes will generate even better ideas and more ideas. We want you to talk it up. We want you to talk to each other and talk to other people, because there may be that one idea out there, there are 5 ideas out there that are each worth $3,000, all of a sudden it's worth $15,000. We are looking for constructive ideas. There is no bad idea. We may not use it, but it's not a bad idea.
And just because we don't use it doesn't mean it's not worthy. It may be something, if we don't use it this year, we mean next year. We're going to have deficit for years to come, so.
We ask that you start by thinking about ideas that are not related to student program, that are not related to staff. And if possible, think about long-term solutions as opposed to a quick fix. Maybe it's a partial piece this year and another partial piece next year that in the end result will add up to something bigger.
The floor is yours. Anyone have comments, thoughts?
I want to
ideas?
jump on this one. Okay, I think I can hit almost all of them. This is not a one-time quick fix. This is related to the community. And it also brings in the town. So it would be the town, the community, and it would be part of the school property. And one thing I'd like to really open up, and I don't know if this would be bringing in a revenue. We do have 100 acres here. How many acres do we have?
A little over 100 acres.
A little over 100 acres.
The schools sit on part of that. So there's roughly about 66 acres of
Non-school, non-building.
Not school buildings.
66 acres of non-school.
Roughly, yeah.
I'd like to throw my hat in the ring with talking to the YMCA and bringing in some type of have it on the school property, have the community come in and use it. We've had people killed on Church Street from walking. The weather's horrible to do any kind of physical fitness. I'd like to join up with Marissa Farrakalo, and I think a YMCA in this area would draw in people from another area. Now, whether we rent the land.
I was going to say, so it's using land, not putting building on it, but using land.
No, it would be a building.
Building. Okay. That's why I just want to clarify.
And
Okay.
I don't know what I don't know is how would it work in with a capital project? How would it work in with, who would do the billing, who would be responsible?
And let's not worry about that today.
No idea.
We're getting ideas.
How that would work.
We won't get mired down in the details. There would be a lot of details, but it's an idea.
I think a community, and I did talk to Marissa about this today, and I asked her about it. She was...
It is a tangential idea to what the board has spoken about all year long, about a community fitness center on the property, so it's a branching of that idea. So thank you, Barb.
I'd like to bring the Y in.
Additional
I don't
revenue.
know if- And I don't even know if the YMCA would be the good thing. Maybe we do it on our own. I don't know. Marissa did say that she mentioned Lake Shore, and Kenton did something similar to that already.
City of Town wanted it too. They built a fitness center.
What'd they do?
Built a fitness center. They didn't partner with another agency, but they did on their property.
And
build a
maybe we
fitness
don't
center.
need to partner with another agency, but just have it available. It could bring in, right now, if I want to go to the Y and walk around their thing in inclement, in good weather, I have to travel 20 miles. I'm not interested in, the other thing is it's free on my health insurance. So that's, and the Y is a non-for-profit. So I don't know how that works. But I would be interested in working on that.
That's all about the ideas. We don't have to work through everyone today. That's Barb's recording for our administrative meeting tomorrow, so thank you, Barb. We appreciate that. So, thank you. Anyone
Well,
else?
just springboarding off of that, I think it's really important that we start looking at how to generate more revenue. And somebody brought it up at the community forum the other day about trying to get more businesses into this town. And I know, Barb said
McDonald's.
this is a right to, no McDonald's. But when you go down Main Street, there are a lot of empty buildings. The hardware store has been closed, there's restaurants that have been closed, I know there's a bank going in.
Meridian,
Oh,
right?
it's credit union?
Credit union.
Yeah.
Oh, it is?
Yes,
Well, there you go then. I didn't know that.
if they can get permission to build in.
Is that what the big bulldozer is sitting
What
there?
Lauren's saying, and correct me if I'm
might
wrong.
be, 'cause it looks like there's
We need to
little-
work with the town.
We
Yes,
need to
we
work
do.
with the town.
Yes, we do.
We need to get them on our side. And
We need them to stop making laws of what can be sold and what can't, too.
well, and it's not even about taking farmland to build businesses. There's a lot of existing empty
agree.
space that, you know, bring in.
And I would even push that further, not just businesses, but more residential homes too. The
Well, there
more
you go.
tax base you have.
Another Weller
Oh,
development, that's what we need.
Again, like I said last week, there's a very, and I hats off to the Conservation Committee in Eaton. They are very strict about any outside land, and that's fine. Because we have plenty, like Laura said, that's right in town, that's not being used. And they've been, I think, the town of Eden have been very creative with grants and whatnot, bringing, so. But
Created with what?
with grants,
So you have
But
to
the businesses have to have the people to support them. And talking as somebody that had that hardware store,
Yeah.
it's not as easy as just opening a business. You must then have people that are going to support that business for it to succeed. There have been businesses that have tried several along Main Street that have failed because this is a bedroom community. People pass a lot of other businesses on the way home that they stop at. So just putting a business in doesn't make it successful.
But again, in trying to create ideas, we can't do the solutions too, or the concerns. So you have two aspects. You have your drawing in revenue, which I absolutely agree with, and then your expenditure. The budget is about the expenditure. Okay, because you can't go over it.
But in closing the gap, if we increase our revenues, that frees us up as well. So, but yes, what the public votes on it is the spending plan, not the revenue. But if we are able to increase our revenue somehow,
We
that
like the
frees us
idea.
up on the spending.
Yes.
I know it's been talked about numerous times. It's not a great idea in my eye, but can the infrastructure of the schools handle taking the kids out of the GLP and moving them into the other buildings? I don't know that answer. And then take the GLP and see if that's rentable, whatever.
This is one of the needs assessment that the board has asked us to do. We do have an RFP that is going out that David and Tom and I are working on to bring in firms to help us try to assess what that looks like. Right now, our gas runs right under GLP, so we're just simply shutting down GLP. And even if you want to sell it, let's say, as a source of revenue, we still have to figure out how to separate from that. So that is one piece. Another one to consider is that there are certainly, there is some truth to what if in fact a development did go in, as it did before. They didn't sell GLP the last time, they closed it, and thank goodness it was there to open. So there really are factions of people that aren't sure what to do. But this is where we are going, and I think that you and I have had some conversation about these task forces that are going to be opening up within the next month to take a look at sixth grade coming up here and looking at a middle school model and a high school model, taking a look at possibly building a community facility here, and where might the business and the district offices land. Certainly, the governor has added a whole new piece about a full-time pre-K. If that's the case, then we need the space at GLP as well. So absolutely, that is on the table. What does it cost for us to do that, and what is the length of time, and what are the ramifications is what all of these task forces are going to be looking at the same time.
The other thing that I wanted to touch on was, from what you're telling me, New York State Legislature wants us to either consolidate or change the way we do education.
And/or the governor.
Or the governor, whoever, okay? I'd love to sit at one of these meetings with these people, because I'd like to...
It's 3 men in a room.
Whatever.
That's really what it comes down to.
Well, what I can tell you is on the agenda this past weekend in Albany, the governor was supposed to speak, and then he canceled. So I wanted to listen to him, too.
But anyway, how do we know, and I don't know, I know it's distasteful for me to think about it, but how do we know consolidation isn't a good idea?
You know what? What we have seen with consolidation, please, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong at all, there have been several districts who have looked at the consolidation, and many times one district benefits, and many times the other district doesn't benefit. So
Depends.
many times it gets voted down because it's not good for one district.
Again, I'd like to share, I went to the, convention in the fall last year, not this year, Sandy, but the year before, and I sat on some of the talks about consolidating, and I was the one person that I was on the school board to join North Collins and Eden. And after I sat in that talk and listened to these men they were just almost in tears. To take the emotional aspect of a school district and make them join another one is impossible.
Oh, it
It's
might be us
truly-
being forced to join with somebody
Oh,
else.
no, it's truly impossible if, to join up with North Collins. And first of all, there's a couple $100,000 that they do a, what do you call that?
Study?
A study.
Yeah.
And then, so these guys come back and tell them what you should do and can't, and then you have, the real problem is the people in the community. And I don't even want to say it's a problem, but that's where.
Well, the loss of a school sometimes is the
It's
loss
it's a loss
of
of
a
an
community.
identity.
Makes
But the
sense to me,
shared
yeah.
services is good for districts. We're doing it right now with football. So we have an agreement, the board agreed from North Collins and from Eden to share football. That is a consolidation or a shared service. The complication right now is that we can't even go out looking for them this year because the proposal on the table, or it's a bill from the governor, is in the 15-16 school year that districts that have $100,000 worth of these type of shared or consolidated services, that there will be tax credits given back to the residents. If I come up with $50,000 worth of shared services in this coming school year, I get to ground zero for the following year, got to start all over. So it ties our hands even right now. But in some cases, yes, it is good. We look at our sports teams. We have small sports teams, so does North Collins. They know each other, they're on little leagues together, so playing together is smart, which is why we're thrilled about football. We could look at other sports and do that too. So in some cases, it is good. I think where the angst comes is when a community like a West Valley or North Collins or some of the really small districts think their school is gone and therefore their hub is gone, and then their community folds, and that is true. That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
But looking at it differently, if the elementary school's doing something different, or Laura and I had a conversation about us offering AP Psych and them offering some other course and having our kids take it with each other. That's a distance learning concept. That's been around a long time too. But you have to have the infrastructure to do it.
Right.
And so when we've declined the percentage that we put into capital expenditure, we're not ready to do it. We don't have anything to allow us to do that right now.
I'll also give an example in Niagara Falls. When Niagara Falls went to a single secondary complex, single high school, because they used to have two high schools. Well, they lost population. Mark, you could probably confirm this. When that happened, they took such care of that consolidation because there were such identities
Absolutely.
in both schools.
You did.
Different mascots, all the stuff that goes along with the identity of a school. It's not just the identity of the school, it becomes the identity of the community. As it turns out, it worked out very well for Niagara Falls. But that preparation and the thought just of what that would mean of doing that, it took them a very long time, I think, to realize that. And that's just within the same district. So it's a very emotional process that happens. And the financial benefits you see, everyone assumes your two sets of expenses become one set of expenses. That's really not the case. You still have the same number of students. You still have, for the most part, you may have some less classes, but you still have relatively the same amount of classes. You do consolidate some services, shared business, and I mean, there are areas but it's not taking
not a
two sets of
huge
expenses down to one. That doesn't happen.
But for the state, they do save a lot of money, because sometimes these very, very small districts are 85, 90% aidable. And not having to do that to a district as small as West Valley is a huge, huge savings to the state of
Do
New York.
you foresee the state eventually saying, I mean, they're going to quit with all this game playing, okay? They're going to quit and they're just going to say, okay, you and you're together. That's it, it's over. do you foresee that? To me, it seems like that's what, it seems they're either trying to break the unions, okay, and break everybody's finances, okay, or they're trying to eliminate school districts.
They started several years ago with shared service grants, and they said, we'll start with the carrot and stick approach. And very few districts, number one, went for the grants because a lot of the issues we talked about here, they are victims, that's part of it. There's identity, there's a lot of emotion that go in with it. So most districts voluntarily did say, we want to go ahead and do this. So now they said, okay, the carrot approach really didn't work, so now we're moving to the next phase. Now we're going to just withhold financing. We're going to force you to go to an area you don't feel comfortable with, but you're not going to have much of a choice.
Wait, there's another step.
Yep.
Because now we're going to start to pit one group against the other one.
Yeah.
We're going to offer a tax credit straight to the residents because their district didn't do a supermajority, because their district had $100,000 worth of shared services. Even so far as to offer a tax credit to certain groups. It doesn't make any difference. If they all fall into the school district somehow, it starts to pit one group against another one. In answer to your question, I believe that the easiest way that the legislature or the governor, whomever it might be, could do that is to change the way the state aid formula works.
Part of it, and I think they would also have to change maybe
Can you
part of the
repeat that,
chart.
Sandy?
Is to change the way the state aid formula works. Your Mount Morris's, which are 90-95% aidable, your West Valley probably not because of the nuke plant, but some of these other places, they change that formula and say you have less than 1,000 students in your district, you don't have any pilots, you don't have this, therefore you're not going to get this high of a calculation in state aid.
Well, that would force you into bankruptcy.
Absolutely. That's what I think they're going to do next, as opposed to saying you close like the churches do. They just simply say you're closed. And we see how well that
We have
goes.
school taxes, right? Eden has school taxes, but the city of Buffalo has none. They don't have school taxes.
Well, they do. It's paid directly to the city. So that's all part of, they're one of the big 5 school districts in the state. So that money goes, it's part of, I believe, and I believe it's all part of your city tax. But that money goes to the city then funds the schools. So they're paying school taxes there.
If you lived there, you'd pay a city tax as
I
well.
own a
But
building.
they don't vote on it, though, like...
No, there's no vote.
No, it's a whole different process there. But then that money gets doled out from the city to the school districts. So it doesn't go to the school district directly. So you're right there. That part's different. Other questions?
Other ideas?
What
Brenda?
about tuition? What if we offered tuition to people? There may be some people that would like to come to the school.
You know, it's a really good question that Brenda's asking is that out-of-district residents paying tuition, right? There's a formula for that, too.
I'm so shocked by that.
Yep. You cannot charge tuition above your expenses.
Oh, never mind that. So you can't make a profit.
Can't make a profit. But the other thing that also goes, if you do accept out-of-district tuition, you can no longer stop who comes into your district either, because then you would be discriminating. So
High needs.
correct. So you have to be very careful to say,
What is the
change
expense?
population here.
Yeah, what is the expense? But please, keep thinking.
We can't open the doors, the enrollment, I don't know if everybody knows I'm the director of enrollment, but we can't offer open there, but I think Mrs. Johnson has found a way. I was going to tell you, she's
I
found a
can
way. We
see her
can
back
offer
there.
enrollment to school districts, like the autism classroom and things. So
Yes.
there's a way for us to do it, and we have been successful
In
at it.
limited cases, without opening up.
Because you have a special program.
Can I talk to you, because I was the other thing too is when you open enrollment to anybody, that means anybody, no discrimination. So if you
Yep.
have a student of mine maybe coming in that, what if we could only charge 12,000, and they cost us 40, 50, 60,000?
You take a
We
hit.
can't stop it.
And that's why most districts stopped doing out-of-tuition enrollment. This is one of the questions that came up this past year when the city of Buffalo was asking to send their students to other school districts. You settle on a certain amount and then find out that there's actually higher needs.
So you can't just charge them what it costs you. There's a set rate.
There is a max that you're able to charge. So it's not like we could say, we're going to charge everyone $50,000 and our budget woes are over.
Well,
No,
and
but
then
if
next
there
year a
truly
child
is an
becomes,
expense of 40,000 and you
Absolutely.
can only charge 12, then
Correct.
that's
It's a loss.
a
Right,
huge
and that-
loss.
But what we do with those kids that are coming from the other districts, that is a CSE placement.
you can stack it.
That's helping offset our expenses for our kids.
Our own kids.
It's paying a portion of my teacher salaries or the aide salaries. It's a whole different thing than open enrollment.
Right.
Or you could settle in on what you think that the actual cost is for the student, and then all of a sudden that child becomes a high need for some reason. Now you have a bigger issue.
Then my next question was, and this is probably going to get me into trouble, but have we looked into outside transportation sources? I know
I have not for
busing
the year.
is very expensive.
I know we've looked in the past, it has not been on the table this year.
Especially
So-
since most of our buses are at a point of,
No return.
yeah.
Exactly. So
You know, rather than replacing our
I know
fleet.
transportation is expensive. So like a Fisher bus service and I'm throwing
I
my
do know that
fellow
it
coworkers
came up before I was here, and it was a conversation piece when I came last March.
But, I mean, our buses are unrepairable, so instead of...
It has not been looked at this year.
Instead of purchasing new buses, let some other company buy those buses.
Well, there's two different pieces that go into that, is to whether you are hiring your own people or whether you are basically using a different company. It has ramifications to people who live in Eden that work for us.
True.
Also, if in fact you take a look at some of the districts that have a service where they have their own drivers, for the most part, they don't live here. So it is a decision of the board that has, I know, looked at very carefully before I even came to say, who is driving our kids home, and what does that mean to what does that mean to the school district of
But
Eden?
I wonder if they do use their buses, keep our drivers?
Right, right.
And the other thing is if
Oh, if you go with an
that,
outside company, that won't be.
they won't do, that won't be an option.
Nope, they have their own.
I disagree with you, because again, at the
Like a Fisher,
convention
they
that I
have
went
their own
to,
drivers.
might not be Fisher, but there's other bus companies that
First
have
service.
told us that you keep your driver, you get our bus.
Okay, and I don't know that. So if there is, that's great for us to be able to approach.
That's a good idea, thank
So
you.
that's something to look at. That
And
is-
I was unaware of that.
I
is
would
the whole
be,
walking within, if you're within walking distance and you're a high school student, most of them drive anyway. I'm sorry.
That was up on the docket last year, to
Yeah.
take a look at that mile radius.
The mile, yeah.
The issue is with Jennings Road.
We
though.
have, well,
Michael remembers. Go ahead.
Keep going.
it's.
No, keep
it's-
talking, yeah.
I understand the whole safety aspect. And if I lived on Jennings Road and I was a parent and you weren't providing buses,
I'd drive 'em.
I would drive you. Like, how many, I can't tell you the number of parents that drive their kids to the GLP every single day. I see it. So we have these buses that run these intricate bus patterns, so
Yes.
that way they can get the stupid state aid, because they can drive their mile or whatever, and all these complicated patterns, so we can pay them, then it's.
The kids
And
don't
it's
ride.
definitely a
Totally-
decision to keep our radius amounts.
Yes,
where they're
and
at.
it's
But
totally
that did come up
insane.
last year too, Brenda, I remember.
So that we can get the state aid to
It-
provide busing for half the students that don't even ride the buses.
And let me touch on this a little bit. For those who don't know, if you have students who live so close to school, and it's different whether you're in an elementary, a middle school, and a high school, but if they're below that radius the state says is where we're going to reimburse you with transportation dollars, they're called a non-allowable pupil. You can have them on your bus, but then basically you have to, and I'm not going to say this the right way.
Pay for it yourself.
You're not getting revenue for that, so you have to make sure that you're putting enough reimbursable kids on there to pay for the non-reimbursable kids. Does that make sense?
No, but thank you. I'll make sure it comes back up again, because there was a lot
But
of
see,
work
and-
done
and
on
in
that
the
last year.
community, I get that question constantly. Why do I see two buses go up and down? And I could never answer that question until I heard you tell me this.
One of the pieces that happened last year, and I know that there are board members here who know more about this than I do because I came in late, is that particular piece got dropped, but what did happen is the late run stopped running, because there were only one or two students on that bus. That would have been like the 445 bus or so. That was a $12,000 cost to the district that got dropped. So I know that both of those conversations occurred, and the board decided to go with the late run bus as opposed to the more walkers. Yep, but thank you for bringing it up.
And Brenda, just to clarify a couple of things, some of the state roads, the kids are not allowed to cross the street and get, so there are, I mean, even our roads, we have, our neighbors get a different bus than us, and
No.
they do cross.
That makes sense, too. And I don't have a problem with it. It's the ones that are,
Yep, no, but we will look at it again.
Yep.
There was a lot of work done on it last year by Rose, I remember.
and
Any other ideas?
I just want you to be cautious on the bus thing. Make sure you know their history. Like, they may give you a real low number to get in.
Are you
there.
talking about the outside services?
Yeah,
Yes.
outside server. I would be,
Yeah.
I mean,
Talk to districts that have done it, because I know some districts that are very unhappy that they...
I have to tell you, we will look at everything, but I have worked for both. I have worked for districts where we have our own, and I've worked for Williamsville where we did not. It's a completely different service.
Absolutely.
A completely different service.
elaborate.
In that our drivers at Eden know the families, know the kids.
They have
They're
an
in-
investment in the.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
they
even if
do.
we're from here.
They will not, they don't drop if they don't see. This is their community, and when something's wrong, the garbage isn't going out, not getting picked up, they know it. And plus, it's a small community for the most part, everybody knows. The other piece that I would see, especially at Williamsville, had a little bit of both, some of their own and some not, is that the drivers, they're more transient. They just don't stay as long. They pay them $11, $12 an hour, they come and they go. And they don't know their students, whereas here, for the most part, your drivers are here over the long run. They've worked, they could be moms, dads, retired or so, but they know their kids.
In Williamsville also, it was interesting because they had a mix between
They have a
their own
mix,
drivers
that's right.
and an outside service. And when I was there, I actually went on bus runs from both district drivers and the outside service. And predominantly, if you have an outside service, what we found in that district is those drivers tended to drive faster.
That's right.
Cut more corners.
That's right.
Because they weren't district staff, they weren't their kids, so they were.
Their investments were different, but it's worthy to look at, so I'm really glad that we spoke about it.
The other
Flying
issue,
all over the bus.
just bringing up from districts that I know, because BOCES has a lot of districts that send kids, is that when you go with an outside source, they also can stipulate when your sporting events are, because we can't send a bus until all our runs are done. Until this time, we can't pick up your sports team and take them to that event. Or same thing with field trips. We don't have a bus available until 9:30 because all our buses are out doing district runs. We don't have a driver or a bus to come in to take your kids at 8 o'clock in the morning on a field trip.
Well, and I do know that part of that, too, just to answer Mr. Johnson's question, is that the people that we hire, for the most part, live in our community. And so if, in fact, that is their primary source of income, which it is for a few of them, it also impacts their children that go to school here. So all of that, but I'm really glad you brought it up. Okay.
But if we looked at it from
Yep.
last year, we can look and see what that savings
Yep.
was. And
we can also, as a team, make a decision not to do it, too. We could just say it's a bad idea, but, I mean...
But we put things on the table. Okay.
And
Anybody
from
else?
the community side, one of the side benefits that I hear all the time on the radio is that when those buses are out, they are really the eyes and ears for the police department. It's amazing the number of times that calls come in on something happening in this community that hit the police department long before their phone even rings.
Automobile accidents, that's, when I was chief, that was big.
Can I bring up one from our meeting that we didn't really talk about?
Please.
Is that the possibility of looking at a different food service option that might bring in revenue?
Barbara and I talked about that before the meeting.
Bring in
Yes,
revenue?
we right now have
Sure.
an annual extension right now with Personal Touch. That can actually change. We can opt not to renew our annual options. That's possible. This is the first year this district will actually have a deficit in food service. There could be many reasons for that. We're not identifying all of our free and reduced lunch population. Expenses go up. There are many reasons for that. But it's still the first time that we will not break even on food service. And generally speaking, you don't want to underwrite your food service. Yeah.
There was a company that Barbara and I talked to at the conference that said they would come in and do a free audit to see if their service would save us money. One of the things that they said to us, too, is that they try and buy local when they can from the local farms and stuff. So maybe that company would be worth looking into to have them come in and do an audit.
And absolutely, if you can give me the name of that.
I will.
Because I will say, for us, a goal of mine would be to have them break even. It was the only negative comment we actually had on our audit, so, which, I mean, it didn't even have anything to do with me, but I still took that very personally.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So if we're able to have them break even, personally, I'd be very thrilled, but quite honestly, that's money that doesn't come out of the general fund, that actually covers another fund. Cafeteria is another fund. And someone else had a suggestion, I'm just going to say there, about the foundation in terms of revenue. And we talked about this, I think, it was either
Last time.
BAT meeting or community forum. They kind of blur together now.
It was at the BAT meeting before the community forum.
Okay. About the creation of a foundation or partnering with the foundation to look at some things that we're trying to fund and we don't have the money for. So if there is the ability to either start with this year or work with an existing foundation, it's another possible revenue source as well. Okay.
What about selling advertising? Where are we regulated, or are we regulated at all?
We're heavily regulated on advertising.
We are.
Very heavily regulated on advertising. Even when we put the scoreboard up and how that scoreboard was put up and the placement of everything, we had a
We're on the phone every day with our attorney.
Yeah.
Really?
It's very specific in who can advertise to the kids and why. Like Coke, you know, they're proposing a new law to change the vending machines that you can't even have things listed on vending machines because of the undue influence on kids as well. So it is very.
How are you gonna know what you're buying?
You can't have a name on it. You have to buy the can, right?
Dark soda.
But what I would say to you, and this actually came up from both Sean and from Warren last year, and I know that have experienced that in some of my other districts, and I'm sure that Tom has as well, is that our kids are a wealth of skilled talent. But we can't have our kids work for a profit company that benefits that profit company unless they give us something back. And so looking at sources of, you might see like the cheerleaders from one of the school districts in the North Towns who cheerleads a commercial for one of the auto industries. They have to be getting something back for doing that in order for it to be legal. Our industrial tech team, our camera team, our kids that worked with our cameras and that actually created commercials for Fusillo in response for a free boom. But they have to be giving us something back. So we could do some stuff. We just have to be very cautious in terms of the regulations, because you can't use your kids as a profit. That's really what it's about.
Other
It would be
ideas?
like selling children. Not good.
For creative.
Well, didn't Kathleen Gifford get in trouble for doing that?
What did Kathy Lee
Overseas
Gifford do?
of having underage kids.
Oh, she was selling. Oh, okay.
Any other thoughts or ideas?
Who was that, Tom?
Kathy Lee Gifford. There was some sweatshop that she was running with young
Making her clothing, yeah.
So,
They were talking
other
about
thoughts,
it. I don't know
ideas?
if it's-
I do. I know last year this wasn't really well received, and I'm just curious if it's on the table at all. Is there an incentive being offered for retirement? Are there any people up? Okay.
It's a great question that you asked. Thank you, John. Is the board approved an incentive already for full-time teachers, and that is out there? Teachers have a 45-day turnaround time. It won't be here in time for budget, so we can't use it. We are also, today I'm getting the approval on the language for, on the language for part-time as well, part-time teacher incentive. Again, that won't come back to us for a 45-day turnaround, so we can't use it as part of the budget, but it certainly would help anyways, yes.
And I have a couple more. I noticed my daughter does come home with not a lot, but sheets from workbooks. Are those workbooks necessary to specific programs that you use, or are there other mean, because it's got to cost a small fortune to purchase.
We are
these.
looking at the workbook sheets and how to best utilize them.
That was one of the things that was on here.
It was, yeah, it
grade
is
is-
part of the cuts that we're looking at in curriculum now.
I mean, I'm not trying to cut a teacher's nose off to spite
Nope.
their face, but I'm just
Nope,
curious.
No, absolutely. If something is not being used to its fullest, and to see other ways to work it around.
And it is an interesting idea, because when I was a student in school, you looked up at the screen and you took notes. But we stopped doing that years ago, and we started giving them worksheets. So, yeah.
But we are looking at that, so absolutely.
You had another one?
Oh, well, I did. Just building on what Barb said before, I mean, I said this at the last meeting, and I'd be willing, if anybody wants to form a group and go to a town meeting, or, I mean, I've written the town, I've emailed them. I will say, I had plans to go to a town meeting, but, you know, life in
You don't want to
general.
go by yourself.
I'm the lone soldier. No, I mean, I didn't, my response, or my emails weren't, after rereading it now that I've calmed down after last year, they weren't as horrible as I thought they were, but they still weren't really well
Why don't you and I talk?
received. So I'd be willing if anybody's interested.
Because I do meet with Glenn in that, so why don't you and I talk?
Okay. And then some of the things that are on here, like that are cut, is there any way that, I mean, this wouldn't necessarily help, but little things like, can we get volunteers to come in and help with things like refinishing the parquet floors in the elementary school, or does that all have to be done by?
Some of it's contractual union work.
You also, and it's great ideas to definitely bring it
I
up.
come in with my sand.
If we take unit work and we start having it done,
Gotcha.
we will definitely consider it.
But along that line, the scoreboard and the school district employees were phenomenal about that. Much of it was done by volunteers, because it
Okay.
wasn't considered unit work that our employees would have done. So in deference to Dave and the CSEA, allowed us to do that without a lot of expense. So yes,
Okay.
but there could be more. So I really appreciate
But-
the idea.
And I don't know this, and I'm not looking to put Dave on the spot. We'll take a look and see if it was an outside company and it isn't taking away unit work. Maybe that's something that if some business is willing to donate, we can, and there's not an issue, it saves us money. Absolutely.
One more idea before we go, because Barb's hand's going to fall off. I'm sure your
And
shoulder.
we've kept all of you much later than anticipated, so thank you for your patience.
I got a question.
Now, how did we know the last question would be from John?
No, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't, I like her idea about going to the board meeting, and I would go with you, because I've never been to one. I'd like to see what the heck it's all about. And I'm pretty good friends with Ed Krychek. I mean,
It would be.
it shouldn't be adversarial, it should be...
No, it can't be.
You know what I
No,
mean?
it
We're all
can't
in it
be.
together.
But it is adversarial. Everybody's looking after their own ass, and that's just the way it is.
Well, and
That's the way life is,
The
though.
response that I got seemed like he just drew a line in the sand. It was like, my side, your side, and...
She said something about volunteers, and one of the things on there, and I'm not trying to take somebody's job away. I remember one of these meetings we were at, they were talking about, somebody brought up that they can't get in the library. Okay, kids can't use the library, and I don't know if a librarian is a mandated type thing or something. I mean, I can't believe that we couldn't come up with volunteers where we could, keep the librarian doing what she's doing, but have somebody come in and, I don't know, maybe we got to get people to start volunteering or, doing something, because it seems like the salaries in the health insurance is what's killing us.
In a service industry that's human people, absolutely. That's where it's going to be.
One of my neighbors, he's a retired teacher, and me and him talk a lot, and he said, there's teachers out there that would volunteer to come in after school to help kids that need the help. You follow what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to take somebody's job, because,
I'm going to be the last one to say something.
Beautiful, thanks, Barb.
I thought about this quite a bit, about we're one against the other. And I really believe it's the state against New York citizens.
No, it totally is.
It comes out
really
of my
is.
comments, obviously, I feel that way.
And Tom already said it, it's coming out of a different voice. You're exactly,
Thank
you
you.
nailed it. Because,
So on that note, March 10th, Monday night, There is a rally in Ellicottville in the auditorium, and we are attempting to fill 800 seats with people who feel that they are stakeholders for kids in education.
There's a rally this Friday, too, isn't there, downtown?
There was one last week, too. It is all based on
But that's
state aid.
Downtown in the
Yeah.
city.
It's a teacher's rally.
So check our website
same
tomorrow,
difference
you'll
for
see more information about it. The employees of the district will be getting a flyer and an invitation to join me Monday night. Tom went last week, but some of the administrators are going as well. So just take a look, because it is, I agree with Barb completely. This is something that we need to, your legislatures don't get it. They don't
No.
understand. So
And
if you think they
Jen mentioned
do.
it too. You said you were going to bring in the addresses.
There,
Mike knows. Mike sent a letter to every single one of our
If
legislators.
we had the addresses, all you need to do is just say, please eliminate the gap.
I'll put it up on the website for you tomorrow. We can work on that. Mike Burns is our board president. Address each one of them, asking them to come to one of our meetings. I appreciate you doing that a lot.
Thanks, Mike.
That took a lot of time and a lot of courage, so I appreciate that a lot. But Lucinda, you and I can get something up on the website tomorrow.
If
That would
other
be great.
ideas have not surfaced, and that's usually what happens, you walk out, you think of something else, email me. All these are going to be put on the possible list, whether we're able to or not, and when we meet tomorrow, it's going to be part of our discussion to say, okay, what else can we look at? So please let me know other ideas.
Thank you again, everybody out there.